Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 12th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dow, and I'll be serving as your host this evening. Thank you so very much for being a part of this evening's program. So whether you tuned in on GBN Television, listening on GBN Radio, or logged on to any of our social media platforms, we sincerely thank you for joining us this evening. Again, it purports to be an exciting evening. I have the honor for the very first time to have with me on a one-on-one the leader of His Majesty's Opposition, Honorable Emmeline Pear. MP, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
And it is, I must say, because, the year is still new. So allow me to wish you, as I've been wishing everyone, a happy, healthy, and progressive 2026.
Thank you so much, Colin. And of course, not just to you, I want to wish you Happy New Year. All your viewers, all of Grenada, Carriacou, PT Martinique, of course, the diaspora inclusive.
Okay, excellent. And how has the year been in terms of a kickoff for you?
Quite exciting. As you've seen, the issues are so many. The challenges are so many. And so in this role, you have to be up to speed with what's happening on the ground.
Right.
So it has been a very early start, engaging, meeting with people, listening to people. This morning I got a call, could you come to Hog Island?
Okay.
So that's what the year has been,
right.
Engaging with people, meeting with people, hearing from them what has been happening. So our work never stops.
Okay, then that I can imagine, and kudos to you and the energy that politicians typically will have, because I know it's a job that requires little sleep.
Of course, definitely. And it pays off, because a listening ear is so important when people need someone to listen. They need to talk to someone. I had an encounter that was early as night. I can't speak to name or venue, but engaging with a young lady, she said I was about to commit suicide. I just felt like I couldn't do this anymore. And she said, fortunately, her friend, a male friend, just happened to invite her to church that night.
Right. And it is so very important for us to care about each other, and as you said, to listen and to speak the truth, speak words of encouragement, because you don't know who needs to hear it at that time.
You'll be amazed, the people who just want to hear, someone to hear the story. And for us, we have a very important role, particularly in opposition, because people feel that they want a voice that represents them. They want people who feel what they feel and can represent that in a public way. So sometimes people call it you talk too much, or you always negative.
That comes with territory, right?
But for us, it's something totally different, being there for people, listening their stories, giving advice, giving encouragement, giving hope, which is most important, crucial in this role that we play.
Well, we're living in a world where there's quite a bit of nervousness, certainly within the Caribbean area. 2 weekends ago, the new year was still very new. We woke up to the news that the U.S. went into Venezuela, extracted President Maduro. And I will just like to hear from you, what is your party's position on this development?
So let me say this. When you have two giants fighting, you want to be careful about the role that you play. And so for us, we view this as something, we've always signaled that this is serious. Any sort of move in that light could have serious implications for Grenada. So for us, it's always about our people. Where do we stand in the midst of all of this? So I remember our Prime Minister offered to be an interlocutor. And so my concern was always, how are we preparing in the event that something goes wrong? And that is really our position on this. It's not about taking sides. It's about always ensuring that the consequences of those geopolitical tension that exists not just in Venezuela, not just within the region, but internationally, how are we positioning ourselves to deal with the implications? What are we doing to protect our people? And that, for me, is the crucial thing.
Part of the balance is between principle and practicality, I have no doubt, and that's a thin line sometimes politicians have to walk. We later heard, certainly during the press conference a couple of Saturdays ago, President Bush, I'm saying Bush, President Trump, you know, made the pronouncement that they're going to be ruling Venezuela. Again, I'm asking, you know, in hearing this, in a democratic state, what was your interpretation, impression? What were the type of discussions held within the leadership of the New National Party on that development?
And again, going back to my previous point, I'm more concerned about the implications for our people. So President Trump states clearly what the U.S. concerns are, what the U.S. issues are. President Maduro and all of those in Venezuela have stated their case as well. Now, what is our case? Our case is Grenada, and how is Grenada affected by all of this? So a simple move, call it that, resulted in flights being suspended for days. What is the implication for the Grenadian economy? What has happened to tourism in the last couple of days? How has that affected revenues in our country? And so the point is, this is not about what Trump does or doesn't do, or what Maduro does or doesn't do. It's more about how do we align what we are doing locally to prepare ourselves for this. And I'll just give you a simple example. The issue of our economic situation in this country, and I hinted to it in the budget. I made the point that the developments regionally and internationally has to define our posture. It has to define the decisions we make, how we spend the resources that we have. So we could get concerned about what Trump is doing or not doing, but how is that affecting our people in a direct or indirect way? And that is where the concern to me lies.
And I certainly appreciate that. And the question then, what would be your recommendations? Because as you said, the pronouncements and stance of President Trump and the U.S., those are clear. You know, well, Maduro is now in New York in prison, right? But the question is, what would you recommend that we do within this geopolitical environment?
And I'll come back to say, let us act on the things we have control over. So we don't control the agenda of the U.S. government. We don't even control the agenda of the Venezuelan government. We control the local agenda, and that is what is significant. So when you are spending in a reckless way, you are definitely saying that you are not taking into consideration the regional and international situations, the tension that is taking place. I mean, it's obvious that we are not mindful of these developments, because if we are going to create a cushion, a buffer, for example. So when you reduce certain things as it relates to cushion and buffer, what happens if we have a situation where imports, for example, is affected? What happens, for example, when tourists can't come here? When we know we have a service industry here, right? Most of our revenues come from the service sector. So if 80% of that is service, and we know a large percentage of that has to do with tourism, then how you conduct yourself economically and otherwise, politically and otherwise, would have a lot to do with the outcome in the event something goes wrong internationally or regionally. So even to make the point,
go ahead.
The posture, diplomatic posture of the government, and I'll make reference to statements in the parliament as it relates to Cuba, statements as it relates to US visa. Remember, Minister of Government, I don't care. Take my visa if you want to take my visa. We would do what we want to do. That's not a diplomatic posture if you're protecting your country. So that minister still doesn't have his visa today. But guess what? If it was a personal matter, no one will be so concerned. But it's affecting the average Grenadian. So right now, Grenadians are being called to Barbados with valid visas in their hands. I don't know if you're aware of this. So the way we posture in this, so two giants, as I said, fighting. You're an ant in the middle, you're more concerned about the two giants rather than your own security, rather than your own survival in the space.
As you correctly said, we need to act on the things that we can control. Recognizing that the New National Party is a member of the International Democrat Alliance or Union and has been an active member since 1983 or thereabouts. Likewise, the Caribbean Democrat Union. Has there been any conversations, party to party, and I'm referring to New National Party to Republican Party members, on the policies being pursued and how that can impact negatively on Grenada?
Oh no, Grenada is a sovereign state, of course we know that, and when it comes to party, we discuss politics, right? So as it relates to decisions of the nation, we have a government, and communication on these matters, government to government, not party to party, right? And so it's interesting you raise this because there's a bigger concern, the issue of communication. Now, we are the official opposition in this country. The government of the United States have been having serious dialogues with the government of this country. Issues that the average Grenadian is concerned about. Until now, there's been no serious engagement, or let me correct that, no engagement with the opposition on these critical national issues. But let us put the opposition aside. What serious conversations have we had on these critical matters? Whether it's radar, whether it's advisory, whether it's invasion or whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's no conversation.
Well, we can say the extradition, as you said, we control the matters because, you know, I'm trying to get now what would be the approach of the New National Party in these issues. So you raise radar. Prime Minister Mitchell in an interview last week says the radar is still an active conversation. What is the New National Party's position on the facilitation of a radar facility in Grenada?
And it's sad, an active consideration, conversation between the government and officials from the U.S. Nothing from the government to the people of this country. Nothing from the government.
But you will appreciate that in these matters, there's very little a government can say. And I'm seeing this from the standpoint that not just diplomacy, but some of the attendant issues. Because not everything you are aware of, even as opposition leader, you can speak publicly, right? But what is your party's position on such a request?
So I would be reckless to state a party's position on something I have absolutely no information about. And that is the point. We are not strangers. We are elected officials that have a role to play in the governance of this country. So if you expect a position from us on this matter, that's a bilateral MOU that is being discussed. So how am I supposed to comment on something I have no knowledge about? I would have expected that from the instant that the government received a request, that the government would have attempted to engage critical people, stakeholders. And I'm not just speaking opposition as elected opposition. You've been part of stakeholder groupings in this country, social partners, as we call them. These are people that should be helping government to make decisions, critical decisions. We did it before, and I can't see any reason that we can't. So when you speak about issues that are going to affect the country in a significant way, cannot just be 15 people in a cabinet discussing this. I mean, we're in trouble if that's the case. The question is, who do you represent? And who are you engaging in your representation?
Whereas who is being engaged has not been announced. I think official announcement was that technocrats were reviewing it. And I'm assuming those are public officers and others. Names were not revealed. But it certainly didn't rest with the cabinet, and I don't believe that the government gave the impression that the cabinet was the ones discussing this to come up with a decision.
I'm not as brave as you to come here and assume so until I have the facts.
Okay. We have seen the governments of Antigua, St. Kitts Nevis, Dominica, all agreeing to accept third nationals from the U.S. What is the New Nationals Party on this? Because, again, there is an active request of Grenada. What is the New Nationals Party's stance on this?
And again, Colin, there are some national issues that should not just be the cabinet discussing.
I agree, but you must have an opinion.
I'm coming to the opinion, but I'm making the fundamental point that there are things that would affect this country in significant ways, and it should not be top secret, right? But from a New National Party's perspective, there are two things: a balance between compassion and wisdom. And let me explain. I would say compassion from the perspective that we live in a global village. We have neighbors, we have friends, and our friends would encounter challenges, and we would encounter challenges. And as a responsible country, we want to ensure that we are compassionate when we have to. But we cannot be compassionate at the expense of our citizens. So when you're speaking about a sensitive thing as accommodating deportees, that is deep. And so the conversation has to be deep. We have to ensure that we are analyzing all of the factors, all of the issues. I mean, deportees come into a particular country. What exactly is the financial implication, for example? How are we going to accommodate them? Let's speak about identification, travel from Grenada. How long are they staying? So when you speak about the opinion of the opposition, or the view of the opposition on any of those, we don't trivialize these things. We don't. If you're to give an opinion, have a position, because you don't have a standard position on that, it has a lot to do with the current circumstances. So a deportee maybe 5 years ago in X situation is not the same as a deportee in Z situation 2 years after. So every situation has to be examined carefully. And so these are the conversations we would hope that we would be engaged in, you know, because they have serious implication for our country.
Right. There seemed to be quite a bit of upheaval in St. Kitts because when the announcement was made of the acceptance of citizens from third countries, there was also a pronouncement that no Haitians will be accepted. And Haitians are part of our CARICOM grouping. What is your response to something like that? Because it wasn't now a drill down on individual party X institution A. It was citizens of the region being blocked out.
I listened to it and I thought it was a bit insensitive, the way it was pronounced. It almost sounded like something was terribly wrong with anyone who came from Haiti. And so we have to be, and that's what I'm saying, you have to balance compassion and wisdom. I could well imagine that any government in a situation like that would be concerned about a number of things, just as citizens would be. So, for example, we have a serious issue in Grenada as it relates to healthcare: accessibility, affordability, quality. Now, if you're going to be bringing 500 people here, adding to the burden, any Grenadian who say they don't care, I would think something would be wrong. So I would imagine it's the same kind of concerns. And that is why, of course, you can only comment on these critical issues when you have the facts before you. So how many people? What is required? What are you offering in terms of ensuring that they are taken care of, they don't become a burden to the state in question? So there are too many factors to be considered when taking a position on this.
What are some of the asks you will request if you are in a negotiations of that sort? I mean, and regardless, so we know citizens who are non-Grenadians being deported, in order for us to accommodate this, we must have ABC at a minimum for us even to consider. What will ABC look like?
And ABC would be a number of things. You obviously have to discuss your national security issues. You definitely have to look at your social issues. And social there takes in a wide range of things. Accommodation, for example. We have people in Karakou, for example, who don't have a roof over their head more than 1 year after a hurricane. So you can't just blindly accept persons. There must be clear outlines, a clear plan of how are you going to facilitate those.
So you'll be asking for 200 housing units in order to facilitate the accommodation?
We have a situation right now where we should have had 1,500 Grenadian-style houses between 22 and 25. To date, we have 17 prefab houses for display. So any conversation about deportees must include a serious conversation about housing. And as you say, negotiation, we got to talk about what are our challenges, in addition to the challenge you have that you want us to help you with.
Right.
And that is why the conversation and negotiation, and that's another thing I am concerned about. Are we utilizing the best resources that we have when it comes to negotiation in Grenada? Do we have critical negotiators who are left out of critical conversations? And that is something we need to pay attention to. Okay,
and essentially what I'm hearing here is making sure we utilize the best of our best in order for us to get the best deals.
Of course, and as I said, our people have to be at the center of this. Any conversation, you have to have at the center of that conversation our people. So they must not in any way be significantly affected by any decision that is made. We can't compromise. We cannot compromise on our people. So I'm saying let us have compassion, but let us make sure our people are okay at the same time. If we can strike that balance, I'm cool.
One of the issues tabled by some of the sanctions we've seen, certainly when we look at the Antigua, St. Lucia, Dominica visa restrictions, it has been cited the CBI program. What is your party's position for, because we have signed on to the same thing as the other countries. We have not received increased sanctions. We have one minister of government who has lost his visa, but nationally we have not yet been impacted. Why do you think this is, and what reforms would you advise to ensure that we remain protected?
Well, I wouldn't say we have not been impacted because it just may not be directly related to CBI, but there are so many other ways that we can be impacted. So for example, we got to be so careful about the actions that we take, the statements we make, the posture. So I'll just give an example. If we're speaking about the U.S. advisory, the U.S. has expressed serious concerns as it relates to crime. They've cited instances. Our posture cannot be to just defend and make it look like they're wrong and we're right, and we've done what we had to do on our rate is low.
Let me ask you this, because as you've raised it, we have both read the advisory. Is that a Grenada you live in?
I read the advisory. I am concerned, but I cannot say what you feel.
No, I'm asking you if, as you read the advisory, is that the Grenada you live in?
No, and that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's a true reflection of the Grenada I live in.
Right.
But it's not for me to say how someone outside of Grenada is viewing the situation. And I'll be less concerned about how they see it as I would be about doing something to ensure that all of the issues that are of concern is addressed.
If you don't see it the same way, how can you address the issues?
And that's the point.
Because, and here we go, we have had, what, 10 murders? And we're at level 2. We have countries to our north, south, and east with probably 10 per day.
And that's where your negotiators come in.
So the question then is, how do you, what do you defend? How do you act?
That is where your negotiators come in. That you get to the table quickly to say, well, this is the situation. It appears that this might be exaggerated a bit, whatever you want to do with regards to negotiation. But I want to zero that back to our situation. You cannot sound as if we had 10 murders and, you know, almost sound like we're celebrating this. Let's give ourselves a clap, we've only had 10. We want to make sure that there's a conversation that speaks about reducing the crime rate in this country.
No, but let's
10
go.
people killed.
No, 10
is 10 too many.
One is too many. So I think we agree on that. So we are not addressing how many individuals died through homicide in Grenada. We're seeing a downgrade in terms of the travel advisory citing crime. And given the Grenada that you live in, as you have professed, what type of conversation will you have with the State Department in the U.S. to say this is grossly unfair? Not calling out my CARICOM neighbors, but we can look left and right of us.
And I'm agreeing with you on that, you know. I'm saying that the government need to have conversation where conversation is needed. You get to the table, you bring the appropriate people to have the conversation. Sitting in Grenada and making certain statements doesn't help our cause. And that's what I'm saying, the conversation need to be twofold. So for example, do we have a problem? And the answer to that is yes. So whether it has been exaggerated or it has been blown out of proportion, let me just finish the point.
Allow me to just interrupt you on this one. Because I'm looking at how do we act in addressing this downgrade, and that's where I'm going, and I want you to speak to it. So yes, we have an issue.
Right. So we have an issue, and that's what I'm saying. It's twofold.
Right.
So we must bring the appropriate people to the appropriate table, the table that can make a difference. So being on to the point or beyond the headlines will not solve the problem.
Right.
That's the first point. And we need to have the right people having that conversation in the right place. So when you sit with the US government, for example, on this particular subject, you go with your statistics. You go with all of the defense that you have.
Do you believe that they do not have the statistics? This is something that we report.
It doesn't matter, and that's the point.
Do you believe that this is something other than our crime rate and a negotiating ploy by the U.S. government? So rather than restrict our visas, we have a travel advisory?
I can't speak for the U.S. government, but what I'll say is I have concerns, serious concerns, about the posture of the administration as it relates to the United States. And let me clarify this. Now, we have always enjoyed a very good relationship with the United States of America. And let us just not fool ourselves. Serious implications when there's a broken relationship. So let us just look at what is happening with the fish ban. If we say we're not affected, then, you know, let's end the conversation right now. Let us look at the travel advisory. If we say we're not seriously affected, let us just end the conversation. 95% about of our fish exported goes to the United States. We're the only country shipping soursop to the United States. Think about Golden Apple. Think about the lady in Munich who is shipping farin to the United States. That means a lot. But think about the diaspora, Grenadians living in the diaspora. So we don't discuss the issue of whether or not we need to have a good relationship with the United States. The point is, when something goes wrong in our interest, there's a need for dialogue. There's a need for negotiation. And we ought to be skillful about it. And the interest must be to protect that relationship in the interest of Grenadians. And I believe there's been some serious weaknesses as it relates to how we treated with some matters previous to what is happening right now. And we have to be so careful. We have to be so careful in these relationships, because at the end of the day, you may have your view, and in our roles, we have to be careful about picking side. So when you publicly pick a side against the United States and you publicly express that, you're making a strong statement. Diplomats, are supposed to conduct themselves in a particular way. And strategic diplomacy has been missing.
Explain this in terms of your last statement, picking a side and standing on principle. Is there a distinction between the two? Because ultimately you would say we ought to have principled stance that guide how we treat with everything.
Of course.
And if that is the case, then sometimes the U.S. might be on the same side, and other times they may not be.
It's not what you do. It boils down to how you do it. And if we talk in strategic diplomacy, doesn't mean that you cannot support a position of a particular country. So let us talk about Cuba, for example, and the medical services. It's okay to say how much you benefit from that. It's okay to say that this particular service is a need, it's a necessity. But I'm not sure that it's okay to say you don't care if they take your passport, you know, you're going to continue. And you know what's interesting? The very said people who had that posture initially, look at their posture today. Because they realize there's more to lose than to gain. So it's okay to speak about your relationship with Cuba. I mean, the United States can't tell you who should be your friend and who shouldn't be. That's fine. But if there are concerns, your responsibility is to examine the concerns, to look to see whether or not there's anything that you are doing that probably is affecting this particular situation.
Did we do better than Antigua? Because the pronouncements coming out of Antigua was similar. We had a minister of government, two ministers of government who made that pronouncement. One lost the visa, still has not gotten it reinstated. Antigua has moved from making this pronouncement to disbanding the Cuban brigade. Have we done better than Antigua?
Well, again, it's about how do you deal with the situation that is before you. So I don't know what kind of program they had. I don't know the extent to which the U.S. was concerned about what they were doing or not doing. So in the case of Grenada, there might have been concerns, doesn't necessarily mean that it had to be the same concerns. And again, Colin, I wouldn't look at it case by case like that. So on CBI, this is what they did. On that, this is what they're doing. I think we need to take a holistic view of this. So there's no doubt that something is happening as it relates to Grenadians holding U.S. visa. It's obvious, right? And so all of these different things that are happening. But
there have been no announcements coming from the U.S. government. I mean, if we're going evidence-based.
That's the point I'm making.
But if we're going evidence-based, we've seen sanctions, Antigua, Dominica, other countries. We have not seen one imposed on Grenadians.
And that is why I'm saying I would not be so concerned about what has been announced. I'm going to be very concerned about the issues, the concerns, what are we doing to address them in a way that is productive, in a way that is going to lead to benefits for our people. So I'm not saying at all that you cannot choose your friends, but reduce the number of enemies that you make at the same time. Okay. Because at the end of the day, Grenada matters. Our people, there are implications, serious implications. So if you speak to the fishermen in Carriacou right now, or Pitimatnik particularly, who just lost a home, lost total destruction of that person's house, a fisherman's house in Beryl. That person took out a mortgage, and I'm speaking about a real example right now, took out a mortgage to repair the home, but not expecting that he would not be able to be exporting fish to the U.S. in January.
Well, you know, this is an interesting one, because this problem did not arise yesterday or last year. The citation by the U.S. government and NOAA came since, what, 2017 or thereabouts? So it's been a long-standing issue. Why has Grenada failed to be responsive to the concerns expressed? And this is over now 8 years. So it's not a 2022 issue. It's over 8 years. Why have we failed?
And I would not go into blaming anyone. Let's look at the facts, right? The facts are, A, the U.S. published a list in 2020. So there were concerns prior to 2020. There were issues raised. But in 2020, a list was published. the government of Grenada was the New National Party administration. What did we do? And you, I'm quite sure, recall what was happening in 2020. Because of the situation with COVID, because of the implication, financially and otherwise, what did the government do responsibly so? Was to sit, negotiate with the US government. So the persons who represented Grenada, and that's why I said who your negotiators are is important. So they sat with the department in the US, and what did we receive? An extension from 2020 to 2022. In other words, your compliance, you have that period, that window to get yourself together.
Okay, so from the extension was 2020 to 2022?
To 2022.
Okay, why wasn't it done in 2022?
Now, we had to the end of 2022, and if you recall, elections was in the middle of 2022.
Are you suggesting that it's a 6-month process and it was carded for July to December of 2022? There seems to have been neglect to this prior, and that's where I'm going.
Let me explain.
Yes.
Let me explain further. So an extension was given up till 2022.
Right.
The government of Grenada was acting on this, right? And we expected that a new government coming in would pick up and run with this. But what happened? It appears that there's been serious communication between the US and Grenada, and the response was wanting. In other words, several calls, several written documents, emails, and all that the government could have done then was maybe to ask for a further extension. But naturally so, that extension went up to 2025, from 22 to 25. So, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to go into blaming of an administration, what was done, what wasn't done. The bottom line is, right now, fishermen cannot export fish to the United States.
Would you, while I know government is continuous, and we'll agree on that, would the New National Party take some responsibility as to why we're here now?
Put it this way, in terms of responsibility, I think we did what was the right thing in 2020. The financial situation of the government, the circumstances of COVID-19, we negotiated. I believe, and I firmly believe, if the New National Party was in government at the end of 2022, if it was not able to submit the requirements or to meet the requirements, there would have been further dialogue with the United States. And I wish this administration would have done simply that, just to have dialogue, just to negotiate further. And that is all, because the demands are pretty much high, you know, right? And so as a small island state, there would be challenges. But you don't get away by not responding.
How much would we say lies with the policymakers and how much with our public officers? Because these things are administrative in nature, which means it's our public officers that's supposed to do it. How would you lay that responsibility?
When you lead in, you don't get the privilege of saying that you're not responsible because someone else, you delegate responsibility, but you're accountable.
Yes.
So obviously, you can't separate the two. The public officers are assigned responsibilities by the policymakers, but obviously the policymaker must take responsibility, else nothing may happen.
Okay, all right. It's time for our first break. So viewers and listeners, we'll take our first break and then we'll come back and we'll delve into the politics of Grenada and the New National Party a little bit more. We'll be right back.
Sunrise Diagnostic Center is the place to visit for your medical laboratory test, ultrasound, X-ray, mammogram, ECG, and ultrasound guided and bone density test. Also available are COVID PCR and antigen tests. Most results are available within 24 hours. Sunrise Diagnostic Center is located at number 9 NS Building, Melville Street, St. George's, with sub-offices in Grand Anse, Wall Street, and Grenville, St. Andrew. Visit Sunrise Diagnostic Center today at any of their offices or call 440-3709 or cell phone 415-9522.
Mobility, a common theme. Abilities.
Are you looking for a reliable, affordable, and customer-friendly pharmacy? Look no further than Hills and Valley Pharmacy, the nation's leading healthcare products and services provider. We are committed to serving you at convenient locations. Find an extensive and affordable selection of prescription and over-the-counter drugs and medical supplies at Church Street, Hillsborough, Carriacou, Jubilee Street, Grenville, St. Andrew, near the bus terminal, and Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George. Our committed team is always available to offer valuable assistance for managing your health and wellness. Discover the additional benefits of our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street and our Medcare Center on Grenville Street, where we provide in-house physiotherapy, massage therapy, doctor consultations, and eye care services. Our commitment is to satisfy all your healthcare needs, including competitive prices, loyalty rewards, and special discounts for seniors. Contact us at 435-6904 and WhatsApp 535-4734. Choose Hills and Valley Pharmacy. Remember, your health is our business.
Go paperless with e-billing. Get your Grenlec bills straight to your email inbox faster and more convenient with myaccount.grenlec.com. Sign in to myaccount.grenlec.com, where you'll be directed to the home screen. Under additional options and paperless billing, hit sign up. Enter the email where you'd like to receive your bills. Check the accounts you want, then click sign me up. It's that easy. Your bills now come straight to your email inbox. Switch to e-billing and put the power in your hands.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We have with us the leader of His Majesty's Opposition, Honorable Emmeline Pear. Mrs. Pear, in December 2024, you took over the helm of the new National Party, and your colleagues elected you to be leader of the opposition in March, I believe it was, of 2025. Just your reflection, what are, let's say, two things you're proud that you have accomplished over the last year, or 9 months, or 10 months? You can take your pick, whether it is leader of the opposition or, political leader of the NNP.
So I would probably not pick one, specific one, but I would say the engaging with our membership, being able to represent the voice of the people, because we can't deny it. There has been stifling of the voice of the people in Grenada in many respects, and we're not going to go into details. But we've been able to be a voice for the people, representing the issues to the extent that you have people in different sectors calling out to us and asking that we represent the issues affecting them. So I believe bringing that to the fore in the last year under my leadership has been a critical one. Even at the Parliament level, the questions that we take to Parliament, many of those questions come from people. Not just you sitting at a desk and coming up with questions. People want answers. So I think representing people is one of the things. And as I said, engaging with the people is the second. Throughout the length and breadth of this country, we have been having, whether you call it town hall meetings, streetlight meetings, meeting with different interest groups. I think for me, it boils down to the people.
Okay. Upon reflection, if there's something you wish you would have handled differently over the last year. I know you're a well-seasoned politician. You've been an elected member of parliament since 2013. So, you know, you are an experienced politician. But upon reflection, something that you wish you may have handled differently?
I can't think of something specific, but I think if I look back at the last year, I would still wish that we would have engaged even more. So we have done quite a lot, but I would still say engaging more with our people at the village level, the community level, the constituency level. It's just about how do you always expand the work that you do in representing the people out there.
There's quite a bit of conversation that you are not quite the leader of the NNP yet, because Dr. Mitchell, rather than withdrawing completely, still holds on to the chairmanship of the party, and by virtue of that, you can't spread your wings, as it were. How do you respond to that?
Well, I note how you introduced the question with doubt. So let me say this. Dr. Mitchell has been a critical factor in the New National Party from the inception. The only foundation member that we have in the party at this time. And so his contribution to the party cannot be underplayed. His role in the development of the party over the years is just undeniable, right? Now, Dr. Mitchell, and that's what is interesting. First, it was that he would never give up leadership of the party, and he did. Then it was that, you know...
Well, I think the question is that he has not given up leadership, because rather than step away, he may move up to chairman. And that's the conversation, really.
And right. So the question might be who's having that conversation. Because within the party, Dr. Mitchell's role as chairman, and he did state it at the last convention, this is transition. And I believe members of the party are appreciative of that process of transition. You know, credit must be given. Many political organizations fall apart in a transitionary period. Many political organizations die in that period. And I believe we've had a very successful 1 year of transition thus far. And Dr. Mitchell said it. He's going to hold the role of party chairman to allow the completion of the transition process. So I believe it's a plus for the party. The balance... Is
the chairmanship an elected position?
Of course.
And therefore, can he proclaim that he will hold the role of chairman until the transition is completed?
Right.
It seems as though he's still in control of everything.
And let me tell you specifically what he said at the last convention, that he's going to accept the role, but he's not going to continue for more than a year, right? That was his pronouncement. So when I say transition, I mean that period of settling the party. I mean, let's just be real. The party, 40 years, Dr. Mitchell has been at the helm of this organization, and anybody with wisdom would think that they need to play a critical role in the transition process. I would be very concerned if Dr. Mitchell says, I want to have nothing to do with the leadership of this party and just immediately exit himself from everything. I mean, you deal with management, you deal with leadership, and you know that transition requires experience and newness to work together for a period of time.
From what you've just said, it seems to suggest that at the next party's convention, we'll have a new chairman. Is that the case?
Dr. Michel said it publicly that he does not intend to continue in this position even if he is nominated. He said he doesn't intend to continue in this position for any length of time. He wants to ensure that the party remains stable. He wants to ensure that he guides and supports in every possible way. But let me just make this fundamental point. You know, one of the problems that we have right now with our government is this. When you throw out old and bring in all things new, you can have serious problems as well. And I think we have to consider it an asset that we do have experienced persons within the organization who can contribute to the continued development of our organization as well. Okay. And I'm very proud of that. Right. You know, when you see the experience and the new working closely together, working on the agenda, I think we're blessed as an organization. Quite honestly, I feel that way.
Share with the Grenadian population your vision for your NNP moving forward.
It's very clear, very simple. I believe in a Grenada where every single citizen, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your economic status, your religion, whatever it is, regardless of all of that, that you have a fair chance to succeed right here in Grenada. That you have access to opportunities and you are not treated in a way that you basically feel that you're not part of what's happening here in Grenada. And for me, it's about how do we ensure that every single Grenadian can thrive and succeed in a Grenada that we build together.
Okay. What will distinguish Emmeline Pear as leader of the new National Party?
For me, I believe very much in democracy, right? As a leader, I believe inclusiveness, participation, building on the legacy of those who went before, because we definitely cannot rebuild this party, strengthen this party, ignoring our past. We've had an excellent legacy. And so for us, it's about how do we take this, modernize it, strengthen it, and ensure that we move Grenada forward under a new National Party leadership in the future. So Emmeline Pear is going to ensure that we are very inclusive, we continue to draw on the resources of Grenadians, the skills, the abilities, and a Grenada where people don't feel that they're excluded. Okay. And when it comes to the party, to continue to strengthen and build upon what we have preserved for 40 years. Okay.
Speaking of inclusivity and bringing people together, what is the nature of your relationship with MP Peter David at this point?
I don't think it's anything different except that we're in two different organizations. We may have different philosophy. We may in the past, if I saw Peter David, we would say good morning, extend pleasantries to each other, and that has continued. If I see him, I would not pass him straight. It remains the same.
All right. And how would you believe the introduction of the new party, the DPM, will impact the political landscape in Grenada?
I've said it before, and I maintain the same view. I don't think there would be a significant impact. Our culture, basically we're a two-party environment, and I don't think that is going to change in the near future. I'm not saying that we've had many political parties, and that's their right. If you feel that you can introduce a new organization in the political environment, nothing is wrong with that. But I think it remains now the survival of the fittest in this environment.
All right. Elections constitutionally drew in 2027. The DPM, who you believe they would serve as a spoiler for if they contest the next election, NNP or NDC?
And I guess you're assuming they're going to be a spoiler. I'm not going to go so far to make that assumption. I believe the election is going to be NDC versus NNP, the next general election. As a matter of fact, all data that we have indicates that.
Okay.
Up to this point.
All right.
Unless something changes, we can have a new conversation on that.
Fair enough. And speaking of elections, we heard the announcement by the parliamentary office the last week, saying that they had to close their doors because of some challenges with software. Give us some background on this, please.
This situation, I'm actually shocked that we are in this situation. And what concerns me most is how this affects people of this country. You're denying them access. And you're creating a situation where they basically would lose confidence in our system. And the worst thing I believe that can happen to us right now is for people to lose confidence in our electoral system. And what is happening? We are heading there. In 2022, when we demitted office, the procurement process would have started and was well underway as it relates to a new system. Not because we just felt like, exactly, not because we just felt like having a new system. It was obvious that there was urgent need for change, because you're speaking about something that the manufacturers are no longer available to maintain and upkeep that system. And when you speak about a critical system like that, quite obviously, you know you have to act with urgency. Our democracy is actually threatened in that process. So the procurement process started. We left office in 2022. We are almost 4 years later having the same conversation. I'm not sure what was the motive of the government when there was a
governmental halt. I'm just asking now, because one would like to think that the parliamentary office is independent.
Okay.
So I'm wary about saying the
and
government.
Your body language just always says it all.
No,
we want to think.
I became uneasy when we say government and parliamentary office.
So the simple answer to that is this. The budget is still managed by the Ministry of Finance. So if we're talking total independence, and maybe we should go there, where the parliamentary office, and maybe we would not be in this situation if it was that, where the parliamentary office had its own budget managed at the parliamentary office, and they don't need to go to central government for something like this. I think there goes a brilliant idea, right? Now, the government took a decision to put a hold on this process. If that process continued, by today, we would have had a new system up and functioning, and we don't because of that decision. And so the old system keeps breaking down, whether it's for parts, whether it's for service, whatever it is. And kudos to those who are trying their best. But their best is definitely not good enough in this situation. What we need is a new system that people can feel a level of confidence. And think about this. A person who leaves their home to go to the registration office, they expect a system that's functioning. They don't expect to be told, come back another time or call us to find out when. I mean, we're in 2025, and someone just has to be serious about important issues like this. And that is where leadership comes in. So you spoke earlier about public officers, but public officers are managed, public officers are led by the policymakers. And so you have to be accountable in these situations. So you can't blame the supervisor of election. And this government is characterized by blaming others. So whenever there's an issue, so there's a ban on exportation of fish. You've been in office almost 4 years, but you go back to the last administration. There's a travel advisory, you blame the past. When will this government take responsibility and act as if they've been in office for 4 years? It doesn't take a year to procure a new system. It doesn't take a year. And the point is, we should not be in this situation today. And I would hope that the government would have recognized the importance of moving this process forward in the interest of Grenadians and Grenada.
Okay, all right. into a new budgetary cycle, and there was the theme transformation in motion. What are some of the things that stood out to you as positives? Let's start there in the 2026 budget, and some things that seems pie in the sky ain't gonna happen.
Well, quite obviously, if I look at the 2026 budget, and I want to put this into context, and you can't look at 2026 without looking at 2025. Quite a number of the things within the 2026 budget came from 2025. The performance of the government in 2025, if you ask me, was way below what the expectation was, way below what was promised. If you speak about...
And you assess this by the spend, you assess this by the economic growth, how would you assess that?
And let's start with the spending. Now, if you're going to be investing or planning to invest in, let us say, for example, quality health care, and you budget $20 million for that, and you spend $1 million, I would be concerned. If you say you're going to upgrade not health facilities, but skills training facilities around the island, and you budget $20 million, I'm just using figures loosely, and you spend $1 million, then I'll be very concerned because there's no evidence, right? So when you speak about what has happened in 2025, and you look at the critical sectors, youth, agriculture, education, social development, almost every sector, there was serious underspending. Now, fast forward to 2026. Now, what confidence should I have? 2022, 23, 24, 25. Well, not 22, from 23 to 25. Things repeatedly that you say you were going to do, you're still saying you're going to do them in 2026. I'm not sure what confidence I should have that it will be done. But I'm more concerned, Colin, about the issues that affect people and where we have seen serious cuts in the budget for those areas where people are directly affected. And so we are concerned what's happening in 2026. But if I go back to your previous question as it relates to what are some of the things, I mean, you talk about the lighting of the stadium, great idea. You talk about the lighting of Progress Park.
But the lighting of the stadium, that's something that's one of the recurrent decimals in the budget for about 10 years.
That's what I'm coming to say. So the things that I'm happy to see and hear about, I'm happy, yes, but they're recurrent decimals. So you speak about Progress Park, you speak about skills training facility, you speak about training for teachers, all of those things. I'm saying they are great ideas. But we have to move from just the idea to the implementation. And you know why I hold this government accountable in a very serious way? They won the hearts of people by saying they were coming to do better than the NNP did. They won the hearts of people when they said that the implementation rate was going to be way higher than the NNP administration. They won the hearts of people when they said that every sector was going to see a change for the better. So let us go back to some of those promises. 1,500 houses per year. I mean, 500 per year, 1,500 by now is what we should have. But we are still talking about 17. And you said Grenadian-style houses, but now we're having a conversation about fabricated houses. And maybe I should ask you, what is Grenadian-style houses, right? You're talking about public servants, and you boast about a new pension scheme. Well, guess what? You won their hearts on the 1958 Pension Act, not on a new pension scheme. And so many of these people who are affected, they look back at what was promised, and you look at the progress today, and people find it difficult to understand how do you assess the government's performance and be happy about the performance thus far, because you must rate that against what you promised that you were going to do.
Let me just ask a couple of things. One Hearts and Minds, 1957 pension
1958.
Act. 58, sorry, pension act. There was no pension, there's no retirement savings plan. Is that progress? Just in your
When you
opinion. And
say-
I use retirement savings plan. I'm not using the term
Right.
pension. So my choice of words is not that of government, but
Right.
deliberate.
Of course. And when you say there was no pension, I'll be careful about stating it in this way, because when the NNP left office, we were paying 2,200 pensioners. So there was pension,
No,
right?
Okay.
Yeah, so let's get that clear first. The second thing is that the NNP...
Because
when
we're talking
we
of
left-
post-83 individuals.
Right. So when we left office, we had an arrangement with the union, and I want to start there. Every person who retired from the service was guaranteed 70% of their last salary. That was an arrangement. And so it came from a decision that was made in consultation with the unions of how do we act in the absence of a ruling from the court. And that was...
But there were rulings from the court.
So we came to that point. Well, we could talk about two rulings. So the first ruling, let's go back if you want to go back there. The NNP administration paid persons affected. So if we talk about the Humlin Armstrong case, the NNP administration acted on the court ruling. But let's be mindful, there was a second ruling, right? That second ruling came, and I think what is significant to note, Colin, is that the NNP administration had an opportunity to appeal that case. We chose not to. We chose not to. So there's a period that expires for appealing the case, and that expired. We were in office when it expired. So it was an intentional move of our administration to honor the decision
So
of the
you
court.
did not appeal, but you did not pay.
No, well, I mean, you have to pay.
But
you have to pay.
But the payment did not occur.
Okay, so let us go back again, right? Now, these things are not as simple and as straightforward as they seem. So what the NNP said is that we accept the ruling of the court. Any government, whether it's NNP or NDC that came in after the 2022 election, had no choice to pay. It was a court ruling that you did not appeal.
Do you recall
right?
when the ruling was? Right?
So let's get to...
Because the ruling was quite some time, because it's a 7 or 10 year period between, in terms of the time to appeal.
No, this was a more recent ruling. But the fact is not that. The fact is the period for appeal. So we could not have been doing anything within the period of not appealing.
Yes,
right?
you can. Because what I'm saying, you can move ahead. If you accept the initial court's ruling, you can act on it.
Now listen me carefully.
Yeah.
We could not have done anything as it relates to making these payments, because you can't just get up like a crazy person and just pay everybody, right? Now, we said to the public, we accept that we are going to pay according to the ruling. But serious economic consequences would obviously come out of this. So it means that you have to bring the brains together to strategize what is the most effective way to do this. And that is what we immediately did, and we made an announcement. You would recall during the campaign, the administration that's in office now said, no, we're just going to pay it. They came in, and have you heard the language spoken? For example, the Attorney General. The same language that we crafted, the same language that we spoke then is the same language you're hearing now. So for example, why have we landed on a new pension plan? It is exactly what we were saying, that there's serious financial implication. And so you must decide what is the best approach that you are going to take.
But you do accept that action has taken place, and under the NNP administration, there was inaction.
No, I won't say that.
Because it was not a 3 month prior to June 2022 that the court ruling came. It was years.
So let me say this, Colin. The NNP administration was very clear. When the court ruling came, as I said, we decided we were not going to appeal, and we immediately set up the systems to facilitate the information collection, to ensure that we had a system and a formula for the payment. Now, many of these officers now who fall under this new pension plan, where they are contributing 3% of their salaries, and so they are not guaranteed a lifetime pension. These are some of the things that we were avoiding when we said we need a formula. We need to ensure that we plan it out properly to ensure that people would not be affected in the way that they're affected now. So you talk about an officer right now, 15 years in the service, and now you're told you have to pay 3% of your salary towards a savings, and that when that savings is depleted, you're nowhere. And those are some of the things that we said that we wanted to make sure that we work out those formulas of how. Just to say one more thing.
Just asking, as you're incorporating your answer, where were you with those plans? Because again, I'm emphasizing this was not a February 2022 court ruling. Years past.
No, it was not February 2022. But the point I'm making, Colin, is that once the court ruling came, the NNP acted.
Where were you in the actions to ensure that both the confirmed workers appointed by PSC and now the contracted workers had some type of security post-retirement?
Right. Now, the secretariat that was set up, the team that was appointed by the cabinet, they had started serious work in that regard. And the NNP, post-election, was going to be moving to act upon the data collected, the advice of those persons, and it was to do with the formula for payment. But while that was being worked out, as I said before, there was an arrangement that between the government and the union of how we were going to treat with any person who was going to be retiring at that point.
Okay. You mentioned implementation rate, and this of course was a big conversation. I've also heard that lots of the projects that we see being conducted within the first couple of years of this administration were things that were negotiated under the NNP. And of course government is continuous. But is this a further indictment on the NNP administration of lack of implementation, that the administration incumbent in 22 can act on things that did not start under the new National Party administration? And whether we look at the Fort George Restoration Project, we look at the UK SIF investment in the water sector, these were things that were on the books prior to June 22, fact, but did not happen.
Right. So the new National Party, I mean, if you look back at our legacy or history, you cannot deny the level of development that has taken place in this country over the years. Of course, we had some projects that were in delay form. Of course, there are some things that could have been implemented faster. But this administration came in almost 4 years ago, and what was the commitment? That the rate of implementation was going to be significantly increased. That all of these projects in the pipeline, within a year, those were going to be out. And that's what I can speak to tonight. Because at the end of the day, 4 years later, we still have projects like the Cliff project, for example. You look around this country, you look at the UK SIF project. Yes, that was an NNP initiated project, but look at what is happening right now. Around the country, the road is in a deplorable state. And I'm saying that there is a cost of development, but in this case, the cost is way too high.
You explain that, please.
The cost of way too high in that, one, you ought not to be implementing a project in a way that it becomes so disruptive to regular programming. I'm talking about affecting businesses, affecting homeowners, vehicle owners.
So what would be your recommendation on implementation?
Right. Now, during the NNP administration period, there was serious dialogues as
again,
to
we're not talking doing.
how this was going to be done.
Right.
So it's not the what is being done, it's the how you're going to do it.
We notice we're comparing nothing being done with something being done. And that is a distinction. So there must be some inconvenience for development. I think we agree. The extent of the inconvenience, I think, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But when the grass is growing, though, the horse is starving because nothing happened.
And you would have no opportunity to do if someone did not secure the funding.
Well,
if
that funding, you can say, from my understanding, was lost. It was lost, and Prime Minister Mitchell actually had to go to renegotiate because of the time lapse in not acting.
It depends on what you consider lost, Colin.
Well, let's deal with the implementation.
Yeah?
Right.
Now, the fact is this. These projects, negotiation is one. So you negotiate, you get these projects, all of the processes. So I ask myself sometimes, what would this government be doing if we did not have these projects?
No, I want you to just clarify the implementation of these projects, because you're saying it ought to have been done without the disruption to business, to homes, and to people.
Let's just use an example. Are there things that we could do when traffic is less busy? Are there things that we could do at nights, for example? Are there things that we can do to reduce the amount of dust that's affecting so many people? Do we have to wait months to do the repaving, for example?
What has been the commentary from the engineers in response to these questions? Because I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing an engineering issue. I'm also hearing a skills issue when we talk about, whether doing it at night, etc., and moving it along at a pace, because these projects, as you very well know, are time sensitive, and if they're not completed within the time frame, funding will be lost. So we need to act quickly. We need to have the skills to act quickly, and we also need to minimize disruption.
Well, I'm not sure if we're acting quickly. You would say we're acting quickly. Look at some of the projects that are delayed. And it's not just the length of time, Colin. You have to consider cost overrun. Millions of dollars going down the drain as it relates to cost overrun.
In which of the projects?
Millions of dollars. Let's just use the Cliff project, for example. The many months and years of this project, on and on and on.
Because this has cross-administration.
Do you think there's an added cost there? Of course there is. But when you check what are the reasons, I'm certain those reasons are not bordering on some of those explanations you gave. So, for example, design issues as it relates to consultancy, supervision. There are serious concerns, and we cannot afford to allow the government to get away with just because they've been in office for X amount of time.
No, I'm with you there, definitely. But you mentioned design issues.
It's costing
too much. If you say design issues, this would have been designed under the NNP administration. So were there issues with the design there?
No, of course. Different stages of a project. You have design for different sections of the project. And so you have one design, but you may have redesigning, you may have issues that come up. So when there's a change to take place, how long does it take for approval? But the bigger one is probably financial. Are these contractors being paid? So if you take a simple example of the Cliff project, what has been the government's commitment on that project financially? And it's not just the Cliff project. Let's use simple projects around housing, for example. Houses halfway and cannot be completed for non-payment. You go to Pitimatnik right now, the medical facility there, months, absolutely nothing is taking place. Are we supposed to give credit to the government because they started the construction of the roof? No. This roof was affected by the passage of the hurricane. The DeCall family donated over $200,000 for the repair of that facility. The government received more than $118 million in the CRIF payout. what justifiable reason can you have for a project like that to be on hold?
Let me ask you this. What is the state of spend of the payout from the CRIF project? You are the chair of the Public Accounts Committee. So where are we in spending that insurance? Have all the money been spent? Half of it? 20%? How much?
Well, of course, the Public Accounts Committee would not have had to look at this as yet, right? Because audited statements. But in the Parliament, a simple question like, how much did you receive and how much did you spend? Answers were not forthcoming.
So then we cannot use 180 million then if we don't know if we received all of the 180 million?
Of course we received the 180.
So received the 180.
Oh yes.
So received the 180 million. And you're saying that the budget, for example, 2026 budget, as we do the comparisons on spend 25 versus 26, we are not able to see the spend of the 180 million?
Look around, where is it?
No, I'm asking if the budget carries that expenditure.
Well, in the budget document, you will see millions allocated for Hurricane Beryl recovery. And our biggest concern is for the millions of dollars that has been allocated and spent. We cannot see evidence of that level of work on the ground. So when you look at the amount that has been spent, it really doesn't connect logically to what is happening on the ground. So there's a serious disconnection there, right? But in addition to that, we cannot just speak about in isolation $118 million. You have to look at that in the context of what was the fiscal situation in this country when this government inherited government. You also have to look at it in the context of CBI revenues. So if you're generating more than $1 billion in CBI revenues, you had $118 million in CRIF payout. You had reserves of over $500 million. Question is, what would be the reason for non-payment? What would be the reason for the halt on so many projects and the delays in so many projects?
And I'm expecting some answers from the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, because that is why our constitution allows for these safeguards. So what are the answers, Madam Chair? And
you're asking a question to the chair of the committee that doesn't have the answer to these questions, because look at it this way. The Public Accounts Committee, if you look at the standing orders, we look at audited statements. So that is where we at this time. So questions like that are asked in Parliament.
So there's been no audited statements for 2023 or 2024. I don't expect for 2025.
No, those would not be available.
So 23 and 24 are not available?
No. Those would come at this time through parliamentary questions. And if you look at the pattern of this government, they have been very reserved when it comes to information. And so many of the questions put forward asking for accountability, asking information that's in the public's interest. The government totally refused to provide those information.
Permit me to, I'm not too sure if I'm understanding, so I'm going to ask the question again. The PAC has not received for their deliberation and review audited financial statements for 2022, 2023, 2024 as we sit here on the 12th of January 2026. Is that accurate?
No, we don't have audited statement for those periods. No.
Okay. What is this normal in terms of government not having audited financial statements or being 3 and 4 years behind in audited financial statements?
Yeah, to be quite honest, that has been a challenge, and right now we are looking at the issue of the Director of Audit and what is happening there as it relates to the support that is needed, and we are definitely going to make a request to see how they can be supported, but not just the Director of Audit. If you look at the statutory bodies, for example, when we met with them, they do have their own challenges, and as a Public Accounts Committee, committee, we definitely would look at ways in which we can advocate, ways in which we can make recommendations for improving in that particular area.
Okay.
So the answer to the question is no, we don't have those statements.
Okay.
No.
Let me just move on to some issues quickly because I know we're going to run out of time. Government announced the statutarization of hospital services. What is the NNP's response?
Our response to statutarization or anything as it relates to healthcare, if at the end of the day you are ending with higher quality in terms of healthcare, you are ending with greater accessibility, and you're ending up with affordability, and people are treated fairly, we have no problem. Okay. Right?
Because I think this targets management, the management of the hospital services. I mean, so is this something that you will endorse if it allows for professional management? Yeah.
And as I said, fairness, people are satisfied with the way that is being done. Whatever the formula that is going to improve on healthcare, we are going to be supportive. But if we're speaking about the current situation, you would be very concerned to note that even the unions are concerned that government has not been engaging them sufficiently in this process. You speak to officers. We were told that there was going to be statutarization last year. In 2026, you ask the average stakeholder in the health sector, or those to be affected, what do they know about this? And they will tell you they're not aware. They have little information as it relates to how they'll be affected, how it will roll out. And that has been something that characterizes this administration. Very little consultation, very little information, and so decisions are taken without the necessary engagement of the key stakeholders. And so the model that is going to be used, I would hope that the union would be fully on board. I would hope that the stakeholders and the people who are going to be affected would be fully on board with the process, and it would not be something that is rushed just to tick a box, because there'll be further implications of that.
Government has moved to engaging the governments of Nigeria and Ghana to bring in doctors and nurses to supplement the Cuban Brigade and other international providers that we have here, and of course our Grenadians. What is the NNP's strategy for human resource development within the healthcare sector? Because importing nurses from Ghana is not a sustainable solution. So what is the NNP's strategy? I mean, we didn't get here in 3.5 years, but what will be your strategy moving forward?
Of course, we have to look at retention. That's critical. And you would know that St. George's University was seriously engaged with the Ministry of Education in 2022, looking at a method to which we can ensure that those we train, those who get scholarships, go out there, that we're able to get them back home to serve. And we got down into some deep, deep discussions, and we actually had something written that we had started to look at. And I hope that the government would have taken up from there, because it's a serious issue. You can't continue to train people, invest in them, they go out and never come back.
So you are a believer that there's a call on the bond in terms of service or repayment, and if that's a stance that you can agree with.
And we took that position before we left government, and we were in serious dialogue and negotiation with SGU, and they were pretty much supportive of working with the government to address that issue. So there's the issue of retention, that we have to be able to get persons within the system to stay in the system. And how do you address that? You have to listen to what these people are saying. What are the concerns? So for example, what incentives would help to keep them? What system do you put in place to help to keep them?
What did you hear prior? I know your responsibility was not healthcare, but what did you hear prior in terms of incentives for retention? Because again, the loss of our nurses precedes 2022. The shortage in terms of the allied health disciplines precede 2022. So what are some of the things by way of strategy now you believe should be implemented?
Well, I would say, one, you have to invest in more training. right? So we get to retention. And so there was definitely a decision that included extending and expanding and supporting more people to be trained in that particular sector. And on many occasions, we had batches of nurses who government decided, took a policy decision that we're going to engage the entire batch because you needed the numbers. But I believe we have to get to that point where as we raise more resources, as we manage our resources in a better way, that we're able to provide more support financially to this particular sector, because I believe that's one of the main reasons that many of these nurses travel greener pastures, right. And we definitely have to look at that as we continue. National health insurance.
What, 12 plus years and counting. This is a 2011, 2012 issue, and we're still not there. What has been the problem? You probably can't speak to the current, but 2013 through 2022, why wasn't there a delivery on NHI?
And I would say significant progress was made. And I believe where we left national health insurance, by now we should have it running. In other words, we had a contractor engaged, right? Local Grenadian medical doctor. We engaged the University of the West Indies in many instances, and we had local persons. We engaged the stakeholders, serious consultation with stakeholders, looking at different models. I remember the cabinet agreeing on a basket of services. What are those things that you don't need to have money in your pocket to access in terms of healthcare? So significant work went into this. And as you said, government is a continuum. And so I expected 2022 that this work, significant work, credit to those who are involved. I would have thought 2022, government would have continued to bring this to fruition, to completion.
Was there an agreement on how it was going to be funded?
So there were several models that were presented to the cabinet. And one of the things we knew for sure, based on what was presented by the contractor, was that the amount we were investing in healthcare, if we had managed that differently, we would be able to raise serious revenue as it relates to funding the NHI. So there were different models, and we had agreed what are some of the things that we were going to be looking at seriously in that regard. And as I said, the resources, Dr. Ned has always said it, the budget for healthcare, just by that, you should be able to significantly cover the implementation of NHI.
But I'm still asking, so you were saying that the model was government transferring monies to NHI and then in terms of the healthcare budget, or was it going to be a consumption tax? What were the models discussed? What was agreed upon? Because the budget for healthcare has to manage the hospital, has to procure drugs, there are a number of things when that budget to healthcare.
That's why I said the way that you manage the resources that you have and how much you can get return on investment, how much you can get from that was a serious area.
Right.
But of course, with it, you see, you can't make excuses for something like NHI. National health insurance is a necessity. And so any administration must find a way to make it happen. So for example, if you look at what we're spending now and millions of dollars being wasted in some areas, whether it's travel and entertainment, I mean, just look through the budget. We move over $50 million CBI to the Prime Minister's ministry. And I'm saying we can look through the budget and we can find significant areas that we can cut things. Prioritizing is critical. And in leadership, sometimes you don't always have all of the resources, but you have to find ways to prioritize and to ensure that you are putting systems in place to meet those things that are critical. And we took a policy decision. NHI was critical, and we needed to make that happen. And I would say we should just continue. I don't know why we probably put a pause on it. I heard that it's going to be relooked again in 2026. I'm very happy that the government has come to that realization that they want to continue with NHI. It's a necessity.
Okay. Another necessity is education, so I'm not going to leave here without speaking about education. What is your current assessment of the state of education in Grenada? And really I'm going is that, is our education system fit for purpose? One. And two, if we are to make investments, in what areas would you advise?
Definitely, we've always said this, and that is why education reform and conversation around education reform is always critical. As you know, we've had serious work at the CARICOM level, OECS level, looking at harmonization of curriculum, etc. And all of those things are critical. But there's a critical area which we would have invested significantly in. I'm happy to hear a lot of talk about it, but I'm not sure that we are moving aggressively on it as much as we are talking about it, which is the area of skills training. So before we left office, we had a serious study done. I believe it was UNESCO facilitated, and I believe that would have given a serious foundation from where to pivot. And when you look at some of the findings, I mean, if you study it, you would see significant work was done in that particular area. It shows you the many areas of training, hundreds and hundreds of CVQ qualification in critical areas, but it also pointed to areas in which we probably needed to add focus in terms of skills training. We started the Centers for Excellence, and I continue to make this point. I would forever make it. We don't have to build new buildings. We have schools with facilities, with resources, and we started the piloting of that approach. How do you use the schools after the students in the day would have left? So I remember, for example, SAS was one of those schools where we invested additional resources. We would have spent on a pilot project for carpentry, I believe it was one of those areas, over $100,000 on additional equipment. And guess what? When you do that, the students can take advantage of it in the day. But the people who come, the construction worker, who come to upskill, upgrade themselves, they can also access that. The facility in St. Patrick, we speak about it, but this is something that started under our administration. And this was a project where they were actually raising revenue, making furniture, using the young people, making furniture, selling the furniture, private sector as well as public sector. So the area of skills training, I would say, if you ask for one area that need additional investment, I would say that's one of the areas. One
of the investments seems to be the tuition free for NULO, because that's skills training primarily, alongside TAMCC. And the government also recently moved to making education mandatory through age 17. What are your thoughts on those three?
I don't have an issue with any of those policies, except to say that when you develop new policies, you got to do it in consultation with the key stakeholders. Anytime you decide that you're going to take a top-down approach, you're going to have problems. So if you decide on free tuition, you got to look at the implications of that. So if, for example, Mr. Dow was sponsoring my son, and I can't afford to send my son to TAMCC, so you're sponsoring that child every year, his tuition. And then the government takes a policy position that Mr. Dow will have free tuition for his son now. Guess what happens? His son gets free tuition, my son gets free tuition. But my son still cannot go to TAMCC because tuition alone doesn't take you there. You need transportation. You need support as it relates to other fees. And mind you, most of the skilled areas, let's just be clear on that, the basic tuition doesn't cover it. So even if that tuition is paid, you still can't access the program, because whatever you need for that specific program definitely is going to cost you more than $1,000 average.
So the example that you used, the sponsorship needs to continue for Mr. Dow's son.
Well, that's the point.
To ensure
and I'm saying that
those additionals.
Mr. Dow would not mind a policy that says because he can afford it, he would continue to afford it, because he understands that another person...
Are you suggesting, therefore, that we ought not to have done free tuition across the board?
I believe Mr. Dow should be able to say, I have a need, and I'm applying actually to access the service, and your case is assessed. And so based on the assessment of your case, you are granted, because once you go across the board, you're going to deny persons who genuinely cannot afford.
Please explain how if you give everybody free tuition, you're denying some.
Because, of course, government just can't afford to provide free tuition for everyone and provide free transportation and support for those who cannot afford transport. Are you saying the transportation
allowance has been discontinued?
There are students who used to benefit from transportation allowance and support from the government, and it's no longer available. That's a fact.
I'm asking, is the transportation allowance has been discontinued?
As far as we are aware, from the government directly, yeah.
Okay. All right. Other issues, education, because you did mention TVET, and this is a pet one of mine, so I'm going to mention it because it is in your constituency. So I'm going to the land grant for UWI, 89 acres, which of course is the second largest land grant the university has received, I hope, in 2011, 2012, and nothing has happened. What are your impressions? Because I know that you were actively involved in conversations again, and nothing has happened to date. What is your stance as parliamentary representative for the area and development of the rural economy, because you can tie both together?
Of course. And I'm really surprised that somebody like yourself, who obviously know better, would even ask a question like this, because we all know that funding for the facility was never the responsibility of the government, and the University of the West Indies has said so publicly. There are records to say that they had means through which they can raise the funding for the project. So government's commitment to that was the land. And I remember when we went into government, they came to meet with us. And why did they come? To confirm that we are going to continue the commitment of the previous government. And we said, absolutely, we have no
But I'm referring to agitation, because the people's lands were given up to an institution, and the people have not benefited. So as a leader, constituency, Minister of Education, one ought to be agitating that there is action when you give up 89 acres of scarce resources.
Right, and fundamentally, the issue of funding, I go back to a previous question, the balance between compassion and wisdom in the scenario we discussed. And similarly in this situation, we are very supportive of the university in terms of having the project. Extremely supportive. But the government did their part, which is to make the lands available. We are not able to build the university. So of course that is a factor or a situation where we have to support the university in any way. And we made further commitments of ways that we might be able to assist. But mind you, the university was always clear as it relates to the ability to raise the resources in that regard.
Yeah, and I believe
of the agitation. Renegotiation,
sorry, go ahead.
I think renegotiating is what exactly probably needs to happen at this stage. And we started conversation with the previous administration, our administration, and the university. What is your intention? How far are you as it relates to this? But I believe if you look at what was done by government, the commitment of government, I believe it was a fair commitment of the government. And of course, as I said, if you attend board meetings of the university, it's a conversation. You attend whatever sector meetings as it relates to, it's a conversation. But of course, there's just so much that government can do if a university want to construct another landmark here in Grenada.
Okay, and would you be supportive of a deadline and reclaiming the land? Because if in over a decade nothing has been done.
Well, that conversation was had. That conversation was had, and not to go into too much details on the conversation, quite clearly there was some additional commitments before we left office as to what they were working on at the time.
Because I know TAMCC would love a new campus.
Well, of course.
And a place to host a new campus.
Of course, absolutely agree. And that's the point I'm making. There was dialogue. And of course, you understand the bigger picture for the university, and we wanted to collaborate and support as far as was possible.
Okay. It's time to wrap up, so I would love you to give closing comments on any theme that you like.
So let me say this. I'm very concerned, Colin, as to the state of play in Grenada at this time. There's a serious issue in Grenada as it relates to cost of living, rising cost of living, and the average Grenadian is severely affected. Every single month, the cost of goods are going up. We can talk inflated increasing costs, imported inflation. We can speak about imported inflation. But when you look at it, the question is, what is the government doing locally to cushion that effect? So the government has majority shares in Grenlec. Cost of electricity is going up. How is that affecting the average person? And what is it that government can do, as was done before? There's precedence as it relates to that. How can we reduce government charges, for example, to help people to survive? You look at healthcare, similarly. Major issue there, affordability. The cost of items as it relates to medical supplies, in some cases 100% increase. Delayed NHI and very little support in that regard. You look at the fishing ban currently on. Fishermen just are concerned what's going to happen at the end of the month for them. There's absolutely no word from the government. How can we support them? Whether it be maybe President's Millibug and how we supported farmers at that time. What can we do in the interim? Because there are some people who at the end of the month, they would not be able to pay not even their mortgage. So what kind of dialogue is initiated maybe from government to speak to the banks, intervene on their behalf? What kind of support do we give family-wise? Many of them have not benefited from the CRIF program, and that's a major issue. Then you have the advisory, the U.S. advisory. How is that impacting the tourism sector? Thousands of jobs? What are the implications? There's a silence that's deafening. There's a silence that doesn't speak to the subject of leadership. And so we are saying in the opposition that this administration has a responsibility. You came into government promising a social contract with the people of this country, that you are going to make things better. You are going to do it differently. You're going to improve on what the NNP administration has done. And we are extremely concerned that we are not seeing signs of this, not until now. And we are heading to the 4th year of this government in office. The issue of crime. Yes, we can speak about crime reduction, but let us look at what is happening. The reality is that when you look at what has happened in the last year, we should not be surprised of a U.S. advisory. We should not be surprised. Some of the incidences, so even if you speak about 1 or 2, the nature of the incidences, and we are saying to date, almost 4 years, we have been appealing to the administration. We need a strategic plan as it relates to crime prevention. So it's not about the numbers. It's not about the numbers. If you look and you look clearly, Colin, there's a serious development as it relates to gun violence in this country. Can we ignore that? No. What is the strategic approach that is being taken to address this particular situation? And so if you consistently look at the issues affecting Grenadians, so whether it has to do with cost of living, whether it has to do with health care, whether it has to do with housing, whatever it is, there's one thread that is common. We look at what is happening as it relates to communication. This government has operated on a need-to-know basis. So fishermen in Carriacou and Petit-Martinique, since the announcement of the ban to now, there's been no serious conversation with them. So they are wondering what is going to happen at the end of this month. They have no clue what's happening. And so the issue of information, communication is critical. But at the end of the day, Colin, action is what people want. So you came into government And the commitment was the implementation rate would be increased. We don't hear about implementation rates anymore. We don't hear about transformation anymore. Where's the transformation agenda that was spoken of? What do we have to show outside of the projects that the New National Party initiated? The people of the country want answers because they are seriously affected in so many ways. And this administration has not sent a signal that they are prepared to keep their commitments and their promises. So the public officer who voted in this government expecting that they're going to receive a 1958 pension, they're recognizing that that's not going to be. The public officer who voted this administration because they expected to get permanent with the stroke of a pen, it's not going to happen. So you have officers now receiving letters, and you know the system, receiving letters from the cabinet secretary saying to them that they are permanent in the service. We know how it's done. You know how it's done. Permanent in the service means an appointment letter from the Public Service Commission. So you can't fool a person into believing that they're permanent because you told them or you promised them that you're going to make them permanent with the stroke of a pen. It doesn't work like that. And so that is why I'm saying that the promises that a party makes in opposition, you want to be very careful with those. Because if you're going to promise your way into government, eventually it's going to catch up with you. So if you promise 500 houses per year, and in your fourth year, heading to your fourth year, you have 17, it's going to catch up with you. And that is why it's a principle of the New National Party. We are very principled about the promises that we make. And that is why when you ask about the numbers earlier, we don't just jump up one morning and say, okay, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. You want to make sure, and that is why the government is in so much problems as it relates to this matter. Because before you pay, you must know what you're paying, how you're paying it, or else you're going to have financial problems. And that is why 2 consecutive years of a deficit in this country is not surprising. Mismanagement. That is why when you look at the last budget and the underspending in so many critical areas of health, housing, education, it's not surprising. But what you want to look at is where the spending is actually taking place. Who is actually benefited? I heard the Prime Minister use a term recently, and I'm sure you heard it, the importance of deferred gratification, because you want our young people to learn how to defer gratification. I wish this administration took that model into consideration when they came into office. Because this administration, the reason we're in this position, they came into office, didn't consider deferred gratification. So they immediately increased their salaries, in some cases over 100%. They went on a spending spree. So travel budgets were double what was budgeted the previous year. Wastage in so many areas. And then you wonder, how is it that we're in a situation where ordinary people who are not supposed to experience a wait of more than 90 days for payment from the Treasury, in some cases, they're experiencing more than 6 months, in some cases, years. And so I am saying tonight, Colin, that the New National Party is prepared and ready for governance. We have, I believe, a serious advantage. Experienced persons within our party and new persons that we've attracted since 2022. We're in the process of developing our manifesto. We've reviewed many of the areas, what we did before, and that is the beauty about experience. You can look back at your previous achievements and you can state exactly what are the lessons learned and how you're going to do better. And that's the critical thing. The New National Party is ready to return to office at the request of the people, and their voice is already very loud.
Alrighty.
extremely loud, and we are ready to serve the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
Thank you very much, Honorable Evelyn Pear, leader of His Majesty's Opposition. Certainly a pleasure having our first conversation since taking the helm. And to you, ladies and gentlemen, as per usual, thank you very much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure. Of course, we continue to encourage you to be good to each other, uplift each other for the betterment of Grenada. Looking forward to being with you again next 6 days, 22.5 hours. Take good care. Good evening.